All right. Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha, Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And wanted to go into this lesson, as you can see, I titled it The Siege. And I was watching this video that was put up by Dabu7 or Dabu77. As you can see, it says, get ready, senators given satellite phones for quote unquote disruptive event that will take out communications. And when you listen to the video, I linked it in the description box. But when you listen to the video, it basically, as it says, amid growing concerns of security risks to members of Congress, more than 50 senators have been issued satellite phones for emergency communication. People familiar with the measures told CBS News. In testimony before the Senate Appropriations Committee last month, Senate Sergeant of Arms Karen Gibson said satellite communication is being deployed, quote unquote, to ensure a redundant and secure means of communication during a disruptive event. And that opens up the question of what is said disruption event. It goes on, it says Gibson said the phones are a security backstop in the case of an emergency that takes out communication in part of America. Federal funding will pay for the satellite airtime needed to utilize phone devices. The thing about this that makes it interesting is that when you make statements like in the case of a disruptive event or just in case something goes wrong, there are a plethora of things that can go wrong in different ways. However, when you provide some temporary solution or some like some supposed relief package, right? And then you say something like, "Oh, hold on to this just in case something goes wrong." That in itself sort of gives away that you may have some idea of how something can go wrong. If you're giving them satellite phones to say that, oh, just in case something disruptive happens, then that leads everybody to think that maybe this disruptive thing will have to do with maybe some lights out or some situation where regular communication doesn't work. Why didn't you give them, I don't know, a bag of food? Why didn't you give them a gun? Why didn't you give them, I don't know, something else that's tailored to something else? See, if you give somebody a 9 millimeter and you say, hold on to this just in case something goes wrong, more than likely you're not worried about a famine, or you're more so you're worried about uh, 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 something that's life threatening, that they may need this to defend themselves, right? So the point is, when you warn, you foreshadow about a disruptive event, but you're giving out satellite phones, then once again you're sort of hinting at that, right? But we have to watch and see. Although regardless of whether something happens or not, as we can, those that have been paying attention, you can see that the world is on, really America mainly, is on the cusp of just complete chaos, complete collapse, as they're still going back and forth with this whole debt package situation, which honestly, man, I mean, a part of me thinks that it's just they like, because there's something similar like this happened years ago with the government shutdown. And they do this back and forth. Oh, they're having these talks. Oh, it's not working. Oh, they're making progress. Oh, they'll talk again, making it seem as though nothing is going to happen. And maybe last minute they just say, oh, they finally came up with something and they were able to pass X, Y, and Z, whatever the case is. Sometimes they do that to take eyes off of maybe something else, to put eyes on something. But who knows? Maybe they might actually default. Who knows? Okay, we have to watch and see. But going into the title of this lesson, The Siege, It's mainly centered around the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse start. I'm gonna actually start at verse 52. Okay, which we know that Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, uh, is when Moses was letting the children of Israel know, or reiterating the blessings and the cursings, or the contract of being the people of the Lord. That if you would obey the commandments of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, then you would be blessed. However, if you broke those laws or you disobeyed, then these cursings or these curses would come upon you and your seed continually. Now, as you keep reading through the curses, we get to this critical part here in Deuteronomy 28 and 52, which primarily, as you read on down, is talking about the siege. Okay, which it wasn't just one specific siege, but it was a curse, which was that in times passing we would be besieged by our enemies, and these are the things that would happen within that, meaning it would be so bad that this would be the end result of that. Now, there are certain verses in here that we use, brothers use to apply to today, referring to, like, for example, the eye being evil towards your brother, and so on and so forth, and different other verses in here. But ultimately it's important to understand, first the context, which is this is dealing with with an actual siege, with actual cannibalism that is going on here. Okay, but then you can apply it to today, but also having that context in there, like like the apostles always say, qualifying the precepts. Okay, so this is Deuteronomy 28 and 52. It says, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates. Now, let me actually go up once again. This is Moses speaking to the children of Israel, right? It says here, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. And once again, this happened, and over again. But one of the main instances that we highlight is when the Lord brought Esau, the Edomites, against us, whether they were as the Greeks or the Romans, or as Esau today, the Europeans, Caucasians, so on and so forth. And we know that their symbol is the eagle. Okay, even from Rome to the U.S. But carrying on, it says, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor shew favor to the young. And regardless of the generation that they came against us in, this was the case. They didn't regard the old or the young. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or flocks of thy sheep, until he have destroyed thee. Verse 52, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates. That is an actual siege. Okay, and when it says gates, is referring to your cities, because when you look at Jerusalem, for example, you had different cities, right? Different cities, but then you had Jerusalem, which was like a fortress. So that's where you had that wall. There was a giant wall around it, and that's what the enemies, they would lay siege to it. Now, what made Jerusalem such a very prominent siege location, or a very difficult location to besiege, was that it was on a mountainous range. So you had to go upward. Not only were you going against a defense city, but you were going upward, which gave those that were in the city an advantage, okay, over those that were trying to lay siege to it. But regardless, if the Lord raises up a nation against you, then it doesn't matter what you do. So as it says here, and he shall besiege thee in thy gates until thy high and fenced walls come down. So what are they going to do? They're going to destroy it. And when you go into the time period of 586 BC, when the Babylonians, led by Nebuchadnezzar II, besieged Jerusalem, what did they do? They destroyed the walls, and then they destroyed the temple and burnt it. Which is why when you read in the book of Nehemiah, what did Nehemiah do? What did he ask Artaxerxes to allow him to do? To go back, and when you read in the book of Nehemiah, they rebuilt the walls. Okay, it was during the time of Cyrus that we rebuilt the temple, but it was during the time of Nehemiah that we rebuilt the walls. Okay, because both were destroyed. So it says here, when thou wherein thou trustest throughout thy land, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord Yahweh thy God hath given thee. Verse 53, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, which is talking about cannibalism. Okay, when you the fruit of your body are your children, and eating them, why are you going to eat the fruit of your body? Because as we keep reading, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters. And there are accounts of this, right? Even in situations that weren't siege like, when you read in um the book of, I believe it's Second Kings, you had the two mothers who one of them was complaining onto Ahab, saying that the two mothers agreed that because, because when Elijah had basically commanded the rain to stop, there was a drought which led to a famine in the whole land of Samaria. And so during that famine, things got so difficult and so scarce that you had mothers eating their children. And this was an account of two mothers that did that. So they were complaining to Ahab that, hey, we agreed that we would eat my son today, and then we would eat the other woman's son tomorrow, and we ate my son, but when it came to her, she hid her son, right? So, and that was during the lack of rain. So how much more in the famine? Because in the famine, you're locked in, or Salaki, in the siege, you're locked in. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out, right? And whatever you have in there, the strategy about a siege is that it's not mainly supposed to be quick. The siege is almost like putting somebody in a chokehold, and you're waiting for them to pass out. So that is what the enemy does. They basically lock you in, and then they wait for you to run out of resources, and you either surrender or you become so weak that you can't defend yourself when they start to break in. So that is the point of a siege. And it doesn't matter how much food you have, eventually you're going to run out. So sieges usually go, years. But as it says here, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord Yahweh thy God hath given thee in the siege and in the straitness, which is difficulty, wherein thine enemies shall distress thee. So that's put an emphasis on how bad it's going to be when you are besieged, because it's a punishment from the Lord. That when you find yourself in this situation, it's going to be that bad that you're going to end up eating your own children, your sons and your daughters. Verse 54. So as it's saying here, right, that it's going to be so bad, you're going to eat the your sons and daughters, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eyes shall be evil toward his brother. Why? Because things are going to get so desperate in the siege that everybody's going to be for themselves. So it's going to be every man for himself. When you read in Second Esdras, let's get that real quick. Second Esdras chapter 6, and I believe right around the 24th verse, right? It says here, and at that time shall friends fight one against another like enemies, and the earth shall stand in fear with those that dwell therein. The springs of the fountains shall stand still, and in 3 hours they shall not run. So what time is this? This is going to be the time of chaos, a time of Jacob's trouble, a time of calamities and desperation. As you read up in the 22nd verse, it says, and suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, and the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty. So what does that mean? A lack of food. And what is that going to lead to? Desperation. So much so that friends are going to turn on one another, so that everybody, it's like what they say, survival of the fittest, everybody for themselves. Okay, which is in here in Second Ezra. So I forgot to switch the tab. But this is Second Ezra 6 and 24. So coming back to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 54, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eyes shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. so that he will not give to them or to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat. So his eye is going to be evil towards them because he's basically going to say, F y'all, you know, I'm trying to survive. So the children that he's going to eat, he ain't going to share that. Okay. He's pretty much going, as it says, he will not give to any of them, of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat. So pretty much you could starve to death, but I'm not. If I got to eat these kids, well, that's what I'm going to do. But the emphasis here is that this man is one that is tender and delicate, meaning one that in under normal conditions, is very, caring, and hospitable, right? But because of these desperate conditions that they're going to be in, people are going to go like the Snickers commercial, you're not you when you're hungry. All right. And that is going to get so bad that that's what they're going to be doing. Every man for themselves. These are my kids. You go find something to do with yourself. And it says, why? Because he hath nothing left him in the siege. There's no more food. There's no more water. There's no more nothing. So he resorts to eating his children. And in fact, he is so hungry and desperate that he doesn't give a damn if you're his brother or his wife or anybody. You ain't getting none of that. It's not. He's not doing that those two hungry mothers deal, right? Two for one. It's not really funny, but where the two mothers agreed to eat. No, he ain't doing that. As it says, because he hath nothing left him in the siege, and in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in all thy gates. So this is going to be that bad. And then it goes on, as Moses keeps on going, he says, the tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness. So of the women that are among you, the tender and delicate ones, those real precious ones, maybe the king's daughters and the royalties, and the ones that wouldn't even have their bare foot touch the ground, because that's how tender and delicate they were. That's how taken care of they were, clean and all of that. She's going to turn into a monster. She's going to turn into a beast. Her eye shall be evil towards the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter. Once again, why? Because they're going to be in that siege. Everybody's going to go they're going to go animalistic, primal. And toward her young one that cometh out from between her feet. And that's going to be what? Them children, those little young kids, the kiddies. And toward her children, which she shall bear, for she shall eat them for want of all things secretly in the siege and straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in all thy gates. So her eye is going to be evil towards them. Why? Because she's going to eat them kids out of that desperation. And she's going to do it secretly as not to share with anybody. So that's how bad it's going to get. And remember, this was a curse, a reoccurring curse. It's happened during the siege of Jerusalem. It happened when the Babylonians came. It happened during 70 AD. And guess what? It's going to happen again in this time. Because how do we know that? When you read Jeremiah 30:7 and Daniel 12:1, amongst many other precepts, the main point there is that this time is going to be far worse than anything that has happened before. So that means that if this has happened before, if this curse came upon us before at different times, when it comes upon us this time, it's going to be the worst it's ever been. So people are going to be cannibalistic. And the modern day siege may look slightly different than it did in the past, but the overall goal of it was you were starved out. You were made desperate until you gave in. And in the process of that, this is what it turned people into. It turned mothers into killers and cannibalistic beasts, and turned, brothers and it turned people against each other. All right, verse 58, it says, if thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, the Lord Yahweh thy God, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and plagues of thy seed, which are your children, your offspring, even great plagues, and of what? Long continuance. So it's not going to stop. It does not going to stop after one generation or two generations or three generations. And sore sickness and of long continuance. See? So these things were pronounced against us. Now, in today's day and age, you may apply some of the verses in here to, like, for example, the eye being evil towards your brother or your wife or so on and so forth. You may apply to how Jake behaved today, but keep understanding the context of its original use of Deuteronomy 28. The original use of it is actually referring to an actual siege. However, if you think about it, well, why why was the tender and delicate man eye evil towards his brother? And what did he do as a result of that? The ultimate sentiment being echoed in these verses is that due to desperation, people would Jake would turn on one another in order to make it, right? So this guy, this tender and delicate man, his desperation caused him to eat his own children and have that evil eye towards his brother and his wife, in order so he can survive, so he can make it, he can do what's best for him. I got to put me first. And a modern day example of that today, right now, wouldn't be that people are literally eating their children, but you would have people basically, Jake basically turning on their loved ones, or taking advantage, whatever they can do to get one up, so they can live a better life. Hence, you have Jake end up in whatever gangs and so on and so forth. I mean, these are all examples of people of having their eye being evil towards their brother. You can draw these connections, to today's time, but you want to also have that foolproof understanding of what is the original context of these verses here, in case somebody comes up, and they actually ask about the actual context of this. Now, the next precept that I'm going to get is in the book of Baruch, the 2nd chapter. Now, keep in mind that at the time of Baruch was a scribe of Jeremiah. And at the time of Jeremiah and Baruch, this was right about just a little prior to the Babylonians coming and besieging Jerusalem, and then throughout that siege, and then after that siege. And I believe Baruch was in Babylon. He was one of those who was over there, which Jeremiah prophesied about it. But at this point in time, when you read the book of Lamentations, when you read the book of Baruch, they witnessed and experienced the destruction of Jerusalem, the siege that was laid to Jerusalem, the horrors that occurred. So as we read Baruch chapter 2, verse 1, let's keep that in mind. It says, therefore the Lord hath made good on his word, which he pronounced against us, and against our judges that judged Israel, and against our kings, and against our princes, and against the men of Israel and Judah, to bring upon us great plagues, such as never happened under the whole heaven, as it came to pass in Jerusalem. So what happened in Jerusalem? It was laid under siege and then destroyed, according to the things that were written in the law of Moses. So what were some of the things written in the law of Moses that came to pass during this time? That a man should eat the flesh of his own son and the flesh of his own daughter. And did we not just read that in Deuteronomy 28? Oh, I keep forgetting to share these tabs. Forgive me. But yeah, we're in Baruch too. So like we read that in Deuteronomy 28, right? The siege. So it says, moreover, he hath delivered them to be in subjection to all the kingdoms that are round about us. Did the Lord not mention that in by Moses' mouth in Deuteronomy 28, that we will be subject unto them, and they will be the lenders, and we will be the borrowers, we will be the tail, and they will be the head? To be a reproach and desolation among all the people round about, where the Lord hath scattered them. Once again, that was a part of the curses. So what Baruch is basically doing a recollection, but during that time period, that was one example of when some of these curses came upon us in a very strong manner. But that wasn't the only time, because Deuteronomy 28 isn't a one-time thing. It's a reoccurring thing. It says here, Verse 5, thus we were cast down and not exalted, because we have sinned against the Lord our God. That's what it was. It was a contract that said if you break it, these are the curses that will come upon you, and have not been obedient unto his voice. To the Lord our God appertaineth righteousness, but unto us and to our fathers open shame, as appeareth this day. For all these plagues are come upon us, which the Lord hath pronounced against us. Yet have we not prayed before the Lord, that we might turn every one from the imaginations of his wicked heart. And guess what? Even in today's day and age, you have Jake in a destroyed, state, which is due to us sinning, and yet the majority of Jake have not prayed to the Lord to turn from the imaginations of their wicked heart. Even those who claim to be in the truth, who claim to know how they're really supposed to behave, to have supposedly left that old man behind and come out of that, even still, they carry on the imaginations of their wicked heart. Wherefore the Lord watched over us for evil, and the Lord hath brought it upon us. For the Lord is righteous in all his works, which he hath commanded us. Yet we have not hearkened unto his voice, to walk in the commandments of the Lord that he hath set before us. And then, he goes on, so on and so forth, which this is a very good chapter. Definitely read it and get into it. Okay, but this is basically it, the siege. And with all those things being said, that is going to happen again in this time, but on a more painful, okay, and pressing scale. All right, this is Bayan Yasharala, Lamentations 4 and 9. They that be slain with the sword are better than they that be slain with hunger. Yeah, because when you die with the sword, it's a faster death. When you die with hunger, with starvation, that is a painful, slow death. For these pine away, stricken through for want of the fruits of the field. They want food to eat, but they don't have anything, you know. Yep, the hit TV show, The Last of Us. Yeah, I still got to check that out. Episode 7 was concerning the famine. Yep. It's going to get bad, man. And it's one thing to read about it, but it's even worse to see it in real life and to experience it. Because listen, man, like I always say, you can press pause on a movie. You could close the video down and then go and get something from your refrigerator. But when watching The Last of Us versus living The Last of Us are 100. They're very, very different. Two different things. Okay, when you see Joe and Ellie and they hungry and shit, or anybody else in the movie is hungry, you don't feel that hunger. You just see it. It's a completely different mindset. So sometimes you wondering, why isn't this person doing X, Y, and Z? But do you know how this person is feeling? Maybe this person is damn near at like E. They got E. They got nothing in the tank. They're hungry as shit. Maybe that's why they're not running as fast. So wait till you find yourself in that situation. All right. But hey, as we know, the Lord is going to take care of his elect, and that won't be the case. So, times are coming, man. The hard times are coming. And we pray that the Lord have mercy on us and deliver us and our loved ones, in these times to come. But it's going to get very, very real, very quickly, and very painfully. So with that, this has been The Siege. And Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.